Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll just wait for everybody to come on in. We're up to 57 so far of the couple of hundred plus that we're expecting. So bear with us for a minute while everybody joins us. Okay, we'll get started. Simon, I think most people that we're waiting have arrived. So, kia ora, te whalawa, ni hao, hello, welcome, good morning. My name is Stephanie Maitland, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. Having worked with many charities, schools, sports organisations, I appreciate what an important source of funding this is, and so it's great that you're able to join us today. It's my pleasure to ask Fiona Brennan, General Manager of ANCAD, to say a few words.
Koto katoa, everyone. Haere mai. It's wonderful to have you with us this morning. A warm welcome to you and to our guest speakers who are with us this morning. I just want to say a few words about ANCAD. ANCAD is a regional peak body that supports organisations from startup, good ideas, through the life cycle of their projects and their organisations. We support people with a variety of training tools, resources, consultancy, and mentoring to help people to grow and enable their organizations to be successful. The funding forum this morning is part of that work. We feel that it's a really valuable opportunity to bring together you, our stakeholders, and some representatives from our philanthropy and funding community to talk about what's important and to enable us all to be successful in the work that we do together as partners. I hope that you have a really good morning and you find the forum useful. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions, but I'll hand over to Stephanie, who will talk about the order of the day. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge passing Efeso Collins, whose funeral is taking place this morning. I know many people were unable to attend because of attending his funeral this morning. He's a colleague and friend to many of us and known through our work for his support in supporting not just Pacifica communities, but all communities throughout the Auckland region. And so we just acknowledge him and obviously his family and friends at this very difficult time. On that note, though, I would like to pass over to Stephanie to talk about this morning. I think it's going to be a really engaging session with our very passionate and interesting speakers. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Fiona. So just some housekeeping things. A copy of each presentation will be emailed to you. The webinar is also being recorded and instructions on how to watch it will also be sent. At the end of each presentation, you'll be able to ask the speakers their questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A box. This is the only box that we'll be monitoring. So questions for speakers in the Q&A box, please. So in case you're not aware, ANCAD offers a wide range of educational opportunities through its LIFT program. Upcoming workshops include Essential First Aid. So that's on the 8th of March, so not that far away. $65 to attend, but if you are in the Devonport Takapuna local board and the Hibiscus Bays local board, it's free due to their local council funding. Thank you very much, local boards. If you aren't in those local boards, but I think that you would like to attend some future training, then maybe have a chat to your local board about funding ANCAD so that you too get to attend for free. Some more information is on the LIFT website, which is just there on the screen. Another one that's coming up is strategic grant seeking and writing. That's on the 20th of March down at the MIT Pacifica Community Centre in Otara. Again, if you're in the DTLB and Hibiscus and Bays local board, you get to attend for free. Please register at the lift.nz website. A topic that's resourcing leaders in times of change is every 2 months. Next one is in the 10th of April. A real opportunity to hear from a presenter if you are in leadership or those with leadership responsibilities, and then also learn from each other. So information there on your screen, again through the LIFT website, or you can go there via the ANCAD website as well. Governance Matters. This is a free series of workshops presented by the fabulous Carol Scholes from Overview Effect. Different dates there, different topics, which are ideal for, focusing on the governance principles for boards or committees of not-for-profit organisations. Community Voices. If you're not receiving the official air magazine of ANCAD, please go to the website and register to receive their comms. This comes as a hard copy if you wish, or as a digital copy, and is ideal. It just showcases the work and interest pieces written by those in the community. Delighted to announce that the ANCAD 2024 funding guide is now available. So you can get it as a hard copy or as a PDF. So you can again head to the ANCAD website under the shop tab and purchase your copy of the 2024 funding guide. So format for today, so Auckland Council's first, and then we go to the Lion Foundation, Z Good in the Hood, and Foundation North. We were hoping to have the Auckland Foundation, but unfortunately due to a family emergency, they're unable to join us today. So their sincere apologies for that. Hopefully we'll have them next time. So we're down to, we've got 4 wonderful speakers for today. So we'll get started. So Simon, do you want to do question 1 for our attendees?
Thanks, Stephanie. Kia ora, folks. We've just got a poll which we'll launch right now, and it's a very quick question. Are you the person responsible for preparing the funding applications for your organisation or group? Shall answer yes or no. All right, folks, thanks for that. We're just about 3, 2, 1, and I'll end the poll. See the results. There we go, Stephanie.
So the majority of you are, and that's why you're here, isn't it? Funny how it works out like that. So it's great that you're with us, and I'm sure you'll find the next couple of hours interesting and informative. So we'll go to our first speaker for the day. And we thank you for being willing to change your time at very short notice to be our first speaker. It's my pleasure to welcome Pierre and Vincent from Auckland Council's Grants and Incentives team. Welcome, gentlemen. Over to you.
Yes, good morning. Thanks, Stephanie. So yeah, as Stephanie mentioned, we are from the Auckland Council. I'm just going to get my presentation ready. So what Vincent and I do here at the Auckland Council is we look after the community grants and the contestable, so the contestable community grants. What that pretty much means is, as the name suggests, contestable. I mean that you are, when you apply to this particular funding, you are going up against other community groups for their funding. So it's not just a non-contestable, where it's not just a given that you're given the money. So we do rate the applications and we do grant them and assess them according to the criteria that the board set for us. So basically, what is a community grant? When you're looking to apply for us, there's just important broad steps as to how to go through. So the first part is, do you want to just basically scope your project, understand how big it is, how much capacity you'll be able to do, is that something that you'll be able to deliver properly? Does the project suit the local board area? And does it suit the board, criteria that they set? The next part is then to obviously find your grant, get the application ready, apply, and then take it from there. So very broadly, what don't we fund? So if you have political aspirations, we do not fund your political campaign. So if you're wanting to take on Christopher Luxon or anything like that, we're not going to be able to help you. The other thing is, if you're part of a council, a CCO, a council-controlled organisation, we also not be looking to fund you there. So if you're, say, for example, from water care and you want to do some work, that's not something we're going to be funding. Other government agencies, again, so that's, say, central government, anything like that. We say, hey, that's a purview of central government to fund. We're not going to be touching you there. Schools, if you're looking to, apply for funding for a new classroom, not something we're going to be looking to fund. What we do fund, however, individuals, organizations, and companies. So if you're any of those groups and you're looking to benefit, the community through some of your activities, then yes, we will definitely have a look at your application. The important thing is that each local board, not surprisingly, they do have different criteria. The Devonport Takapuna local board, for example, that community has very different needs to, say, one at, Papakura or anything like that. So they have slightly different criteria. So don't assume that, hey, my application was successful for Takapuna, that means it's going to be successful in FAO. That's not always the case. So we do want to say, hey, do have a look at the local boards and what their criteria are. So these are all the local boards that we have there. As Stephanie said, this will be available for people to have a look at. So, first find out what local board you're looking to apply for. As I mentioned, different criteria, different application structures. So one of the first things that we'll be looking to do is, if you've identified that, hey, you want to apply to one of the boards, one of the key things is we want to make sure that your application is eligible. So what that means is that, as the note says, if you're an applicant and you've got no formal legal structure, then the most we will be able to fund you is less than $1,000. Anything more than that, and you will be required to get an umbrella organization. An umbrella organization, for those not aware, is someone, say, similar to almost like a guarantor, just to say that, hey, we worked with this person, we're going to lend some support to them to be able to deliver this community with, funding of more than $1,000. And the other bit is initiatives must fit with the board's priorities. So as I said, so for example, if the Devonport Takapuna, if they're really keen on water safety or anti-smoking, then your application will be quite good there. If your application is to say, hey, we're going to, get people to go to the moon, for example, Devonport Takapuna, they're not really going to be too interested. So it's very important that you align your application with the board's priorities. So as the last note says, preference will be given to those initiatives. So the boards, sometimes they do rank what they want to do, and then if your application fits within that, then you're fine. Obviously, the lower, further down the priority list, then the further down your application will be. And because in our experience, council only has a finite amount of resources, not surprisingly, so the grounds are generally quite oversubscribed, and they are very contestable. So that's why the preference to initiatives is quite an important thing. Your community group might be doing really great work, but there are other groups that are just better aligned to that board's preferences, so they might receive funding over yours. So just keep that in mind. As with the inclusions, there are also obviously exclusions. I briefly touched on some of them. So we've got core services not provided by central government. That's not saying that we're going to be funding. The other thing is, if your event has already taken place. So say, for example, I had an event for at-risk youth 2 months ago, and I'm now applying for that. Council's going to say, hey, no, we're not going to fund that. It's already been in the past. We can only fund future events. The other one is that we don't service debt servicing facilities. So we've got the note there, debt repayments, legal expenses, and medical expenses. That's something that council will not be looking to fund. The other thing, which is quite an important one, is the outstanding accountability obligations. Obviously, because we're looking after public funds, it is part of our core charter that we do look after that money responsibly. And part of looking after that responsibly is ensuring that the funds are being used appropriately. So that's where the accountability comes into it. So 2 months after your application, your event's taken place, you will be required to account for that money was spent. So that means giving us receipts, giving us, any sort of documentation. If your particular grant is to, say, have a newsletter published, then we want to see a copy of that. If there were printing costs, then we want to see an invoice from that printing supplier where you have paid for that invoice. So we just want to make sure that if you've applied for ABC, that you've paid for ABC. You might think it's a little bit silly, but we have seen instances where people have applied for one thing and then they supply us with invoices and receipts for things like alcohol. which is something that we definitely do not fund. So that is a very, very important thing, is to make sure that the accountabilities are organized, because if your accountability is not satisfactory, then the next time you apply, the council can and do look at your application and say, oh, hang on, this group has not fully accounted for that money, and then the groups will sometimes decline those applications based purely on that alone. So it is a very, very important thing to not miss out. Obviously, then we've got another one here. So you can't apply for the same activity twice in the same financial year. That just makes sense, I believe. We do not rate to, so anything that's not related to local board outcome will also not be funded. And lastly, we've got, we also will not be looking to fund anything that promotes religious or political message. Hopefully that one is fairly self-explanatory. Well, we do fund, there are some church activities that we do fund. So for example, if you're going to be doing, if a church is doing a community event for anything like that, the boards can fund those. There just doesn't have to be that religious attachment to it. Then you should be fine. So basically, what is the process? There might be people here today that have not applied with us before. So basically what happens is that we publish a calendar on our website that outlines when all these grants open and anything that comes up. And the important thing is to start the process early. Really is going to pay dividends on the back end. So what happens is that the rounds will open up. You will then make your application to us. If everything is all fine and the application is good, then the round will close. That's usually about, say, 2 months from it opening, if it's a standard one. Our advisors will then look at your application and assess it against the local board criteria. If there is time permitting and where appropriate, if there are some issues, our advisors can get in touch with the groups. So that's why we suggest to get your application in early. If you submit your application right at the very opening of the round, then our advisors have got enough time. People like Vincent, he can have a look at the application and say, oh, hang on, you've missed this document, or this doesn't quite make sense. And then Vincent can work with you to get that application to a suitable level. If there isn't any time, so for example, if you submit your application literally at the 11th hour, 2 minutes before it closes, Vincent can't now look at that application and pick out any details where you might have stepped incorrectly. So then he can't, process your application to the full extent that, you might want. And we also generally do not reopen rounds when they are closed. The reason for that is that we do fairness, and equity is a real big thing for council, and we want to make sure that we don't want to have one group get an advantage that other groups might not have. So if 5 other groups all get their applications in on time, we can't then be seen to say, okay, well, but my cousin, his application was late, and you open it up for him, then you open up for me. So we're very keen to avoid situations like that. So I thoroughly recommend to get your applications in early. There's no harm in doing that. So once the rounds have closed, the decisions will then be made to the local boards. That process can be roughly about, say, 8 weeks after the round has closed. And we do have to line them up with all their business meetings and workshops. So then the board will then make a decision based on our recommendations and obviously how they feel about the group. And then we aim to look to get the notifications out after that. Generally speaking, so you'll then receive an email saying whether you've been successful or not. If you have been, there should be attached a funding agreement. And once you have completed that funding agreement, it's generally just a signature. Once that has been given to us, we then aim to have that payment made out to you within about, say, 14 working days, I believe. But if everything is all fine, then we can sometimes get that payment out a little bit earlier. And then we've got the accountability step, which I mentioned earlier. That'll be something that happens 2 months after your project has completed. And we do know that sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge for some smaller groups. And if that is the case, then I recommend to get in touch with the advisor that looked after your application. They'll be more than happy to chat with you and work to get the accountability to a suitable level, because then it just makes sure that you can apply in the future again without any issues. And we also don't want to come to people, 2 years after the fact to say, hey, where's this financial documents? Then, people sometimes, struggle to find these documents from 2 or 3 years ago. So it just makes everyone's lives a little bit easier. So, as I mentioned, what happens when your application is approved? You'll receive a success letter, the funding agreement, and also importantly, you will receive the council logos. The boards do have a really big thing about wanting to be recognized for the support that they've given. I believe that is actually a criteria in the funding agreement as well. So if you've got a nice little marquee set up somewhere, then we do encourage people and require people to put the local board's details on there. So you can say, hey, if the Franklin local board has supported you, then please do acknowledge them for that. They do take it quite seriously. Yes, then I mentioned the accountability report a couple of times now. It's a very, very important step. Do not forget that one. So what are the priorities and what should you be looking for? Again, I mentioned plan early. Definitely start early. People like myself included sometimes leave things to the last minute, and there could be when making the application, there could be unforeseen technical issues, which could mean that you might miss out on getting funding from us. The round could close, then your event could have been granted and you might not get funding for that. So definitely start earlier. We do have a bunch of advisors like Vincent available. So if you do have any questions, do get in touch with us. We want to make sure that the application that gets put forward is the best that it can be. We know that your activity is very important to the community, and we want to make sure that your voice gets heard. We also don't want to waste your time, and we also don't want to waste the local board's time with applications that might not be the standard what we expect. So definitely do have a chat with the advisors. Extremely helpful, willing to spend some time with you to get it right. We can't design the application for you, but they can definitely help you out to get it to the best place that it needs to be. So part of the application process and the accountability is just to make sure that we get the right documentation. I've seen plenty of applications, stumble because, the documents are missing. So we've got a list here of some of the application documents that we do need to see, particularly things like the bank account details. I've seen a number of individuals who do struggle with that. And generally speaking, those bank account details, we don't want them to be older than 6 months. So if you give us an account statement from, say, 2 years ago, we will reject that and get you to, dig out a more current one. So make sure that you've got all of these documentations ready to go before you launch the application. Makes life so much easier. Quotes and budget items, that's also a really important one. If you're applying, your group is, say, applying for tennis rackets and tennis balls, go down to, a sports supplier or anything, clearly show us, hey, there's $500 for some tennis rackets and tennis balls. Then the board, they clearly understand what you're applying for. There's no ambiguity, and they can make a really nice informed decision, and that should get your application through the door quite easily. Another thing that we sometimes also want is just when you do use any sort of venues, particularly some council venues or anything like that, do get a just venue confirmation hire from us, because some groups, they do want to get some funding for the community for their facilities. And if we just get those quotes from them to say, hey, it's going to be, X number of dollars, then it just makes the process a lot smoother. So how do you complete an application? So Auckland Council uses a Australian program called Smarty Grants. This is what we use to assess and administer all our grants. So it's quite a simple process. You just sort of go into that, as the note mentions, just have an email, some user ID and password stuff ready to go. What we can suggest that if you're an organization that has multiple people that might be using this, is to just try and use one generic email for that. We've had situations in the past where Larry has applied, and then Susan applies, and then Rebecca applies. Then things get quite messy. And then when those individuals leave the organization might not have access to those previous grants because, hey, you're not that same person. And we can't just, as of right, hand those details onto a new person, because then we start to bump into some privacy issues there as well. So if you are an organization with multiple people, we do suggest getting one email to go through that. Trust us, it'll make everything easier for us. And we've also got a note there. Again, you'll be quite surprised to know that plenty of people do apply, but they don't hit that final submit button. What happens then is they go through the whole process, and then we get a call from them further down the line to say, hey, I never heard anything about this grant. And then we have to tell them, sorry, you never clicked that final submit button. And so you never actually went through the whole process. So it's very important, as the note says, if you have not received a confirmation email, then it has not been submitted. Very, very important to hit that final button. And we got the note there about the single organization. So we've got some contact information there. So yeah, we've got people monitoring those mailboxes, so you can chuck us a question. I'm more than happy to help out and answer that. We've got the website as well. So a lot of this information, calendars and the boards, what sort of activities are with those boards, is all there on their websites for you to have a look at. There's a wealth of information, and generally, hopefully, a lot of the time that can answer your question without having to, spend too much time trying to get in touch with us. So there are other funds available as well with us. So we've got some of these activities. Have a look at those, and if it is appropriate, then you can apply to those. They sometimes run in parallel with some of the contestable community grants, and they can sometimes have different funding streams or anything like that. So do have a look at those if you think it's appropriate. If you're not quite sure what the story is, get in touch and we'll direct you which way to go. So we've got the question part there. So that pretty much brings us to the end.
Thank you. That was brilliant. There are some questions for you. So when you said in one of the beginning slides that you fund companies, are they charitable companies or for-profit companies?
Generally speaking, it's just for charitable ones. We do the profit ones, do we?
Yeah, so we do actually support LLCs, so limited liability companies, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so we do support them, but there can be some quite strict requirements. They do have to demonstrate a really strong community benefit, and that there's going to be no sort of financial incentive for them attached. So there can be a little bit more scrutiny on groups such as them, schools. But as a general rule, yes, we do fund them and their projects just like any other charity.
But yeah, so for example, if you're McDonald's or FIFA and you come to us asking for $5,000, the boards might be like, McDonald's, you've got deep pockets. We've got other community groups that might be more appropriate. So yes, if you're a big corporation, then
sorry, building off of that quickly. Yeah, so something the board will consider, especially if it's a for-profit company, is financial reserves as well. Just looking at purely the need of the group in terms of having resources to actually put on the project.
Fair enough. Thank you. If you use an umbrella organisation, can that organisation who's umbrellaing you still apply separately for themselves?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And when you said about ranking by local board, the local board, about their priorities, is that ranking available to applicants so that they know that what is the priority and what is further down the list?
Yes, yep. So the boards do publish that information. That is on the website there. I mean, perhaps the term ranking might not be super accurate. It's like to say, hey, this number one is always going to be the number one. But that list is available online. Yes.
Okay.
So you can see which priorities are a little higher than others.
Thank you. Is Rodney Local Board now doing local grants?
No, there has been no change to that.
Okay. What if the project benefits and the people participating are Auckland-wide?
Then yeah, you can still apply to those. The boards will take that into account when looking to fund that. So yes, that does not exclude you from it.
So would that be a multi-board application as opposed to applying to them all individually?
Currently, yes, and there can be, but we are looking to make some changes to the multi-board system. We're looking to, it's with the boards at the moment for approval, but we're just looking to make some adjustments there to possibly remove that, to move it so that people have to apply individually to that. The logic for that is that we find, generally speaking, when we do multi-board applications, is that the quality of the application can be a little bit lower on that, and also the boards tend not to be too enthusiastic about that. What happens is that sometimes they say, hey, if you apply to the Kaipatiki board, then they'll be like, well, hang on, Devonport Takapuna, they're funding it, so we're not going to. So there's just some comments there, and also just administratively, it's a huge burden on us, and so we find that moving it this way will mean a better outcome for people, for community groups, because they will then be able to sort of tailor it a little bit more and get a better result funding-wise, because we have had a look and we find that generally speaking, the individual applications do receive some higher funding as well.
Okay. What is the likelihood of an individual getting $500 twice a year? So I think you answered that around getting applying once in the financial year.
Yeah. If they're for different activities, then yes, that shouldn't be a problem. You can't obviously apply for the same activity twice. That'll be a thing. But if they're different activities, then yeah, it'll be assessed on the merits.
Adding to that, some boards may have optional exclusions where a group can only receive funding once or twice during a financial year, and this is to handle things such as oversubscription, because we are working for some boards in particular on very limited budgets. So it does help to have those sorts of rules. So it is really important if a group's going to apply for a small amount such as 500 to think about if that is what they want to apply for, because the 1 or 2 grant rule because of that.
Okay, we've got lots of questions for you, gentlemen. So continuing on, can you please share any thoughts around the likelihood of local boards funding wages and other ongoing operating costs?
That's not something that is really put forward to the boards at the moment. We're just going through the process of developing the programs for the next financial year, and we're not anticipating any changes to that.
Okay. Question is how to get in contact with a grant advisor. So those details were on the slides. Yes. Thank you. Is it per area, or how do you split up as the different advisors for different parts of the city?
Yep. So all our advisors look after a sort of 3 or 4 boards each, and they then they've got their dedicated bits.
With so many functions online, bank statements, etc., and the online screens having the bank account number but not the name, we have a stamped sheet from an actual branch that was the only way to get the account name. Does this need to be updated every 6 months?
Yes. Yep. We don't want stuff that's too old.
Okay. Why do we need minutes from the meeting where the grant was sought?
So why does a group need meeting?
Why do we need minutes from meeting where grant was sought? Because
we've had instances where people from groups have applied for grants and the rest of the group hasn't been aware or authorized this. I can actually think of a few examples of this from recent memory. So it is absolutely crucial that we have these minutes authorizing that, because we can get emails. It is quite rare, but we have had emails from people within groups saying, hey, we weren't actually aware of this. We didn't give permission for this. Yes. So that's why it's really important.
Is there the possibility of doing paper applications, thinking accessibility for those with disabilities?
No, at the moment, we are not looking to do that as part of our corporate sustainability policies to move away from anything like that. And so we are not looking to accept paper applications anytime soon.
Okay. What if you don't spend all the grant?
Then what can happen is that the best thing is to get in touch with the advisor and say, hey, if you have an idea to say possibly do something a little bit further, then you can have that conversation with the advisor. But in some instances, it might be more appropriate to just refund the balance.
Okay. If we're an unregistered community group, are we still able to apply? So yes, that was up to the $1,000, or else use an umbrella. Yep. If the accountability information is submitted more than 2 months after the project is completed, will that impinge on the success of a future application?
Generally, no. And we will work with you before that process. We're not just going to cut you off and say, no, we don't want to talk to you, go away. We will work with you on that. Generally, we try to get it for that 2-month time frame. But if you say come to us, say 3 months later, we will continue to work with you. As long as all the documentation is appropriate, then it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Can business associations apply?
Yes.
Do you need multiple quotes from different suppliers or contractors?
Yeah, I was just going to say some boards, sometimes for some bits and pieces, they do sometimes ask people to go back and get other quotes, yes. But it can be, in my experience, can be a little bit board dependent. I don't know if Vincent can add to that.
Yeah, in my experience, so with any given expense, most boards are okay with just a single quote. The real problem is when there is no quote supplied. So as long as you have at least one quote per cost, generally that's okay. I can't think of any instances in recent memory where we've had to go back to the applicant and say, hey, we need another quote other than this one which has been supplied by a company.
I think I actually have one where we had a group applying for an air fryer for having at sporting events, and this air fryer was quite a Rolls-Royce air fryer, and so the board sort of said, I actually bought one the other day and it wasn't this price, so can we go and have a look at this one a little bit again? So yes.
How much weight do you place on data such as
Sort of the demographics of the application.
demographic data to support funding applications?
If that sort of relates to the board criteria, so for example, if a board has a real big emphasis on Pacifica communities, then if you can say, hey, I'm going to be hitting X number of this, I think that'll make your application a lot stronger. But if you don't have that information, it doesn't mean that we're not going to look at you.
Okay.
But I think I would say relate that back to the board priorities. If they do have a particular group in mind, then yes, more information is always better.
Okay, we've answered the next question. So yes, if you're an umbrella, you can still apply for your own funding. Do you fund flights, accommodation for presenters coming from outside of Auckland?
I think we have done that, yep, depending on the boards, how they feel on it.
Yep, we're nearly there, gentlemen. Are we able to come in to present the project?
Some boards do allow that, but I think that would be a conversation that you should have beforehand with that. It has to be sort of big projects. You can't just come and say, hey, I want to get some new tennis balls or, squash balls or anything like that. So that is a conversation that you would have to have with the local board. They may not allow that. So it's very board dependent.
Will a board resolution be okay, or must it be the board minutes?
I believe a board resolution should be fine, as long as we know that the person applying is authorized on behalf of the group to do that.
Can the quote be a screenshot from the seller's website, or does it have to be a formal quote from the shop?
No, we've had screenshots from websites.
Like for example, if you wanted to buy, I don't know, like 10 spades or something from Mitre 10, it's not really necessary to kind of go into the store and get this quote when you can simply just get a screenshot online, as long as it says as long as it shows the supplier, the quantity, the total cost, then that's okay.
What is the maximum amount a charity can apply for?
That is completely board dependent.
Yep.
Yeah.
So different boards have different ceilings on these things, and we'd recommend you having a look at that. So because some boards are quite strict and some might not have any limits. So yes, have a look at the individual board you're looking to apply to.
Okay, that's the end of your question. Thank you, both of you, so much for sharing, being here today, sharing your knowledge and answering all those questions. Certainly appreciate it. And I know you have to go. So thank you for being here and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Simon, let's have a question for our attendees.
All right, folks, I'll get the next poll ready. Here we go. Poll number 2, if you could please answer. We'll take a few seconds to do this. Question is, how long have you been completing funding applications? If you have, less than a year, or any of those answers. Thanks for answering, folks. We'll give you another 3 and 2 and 1. We'll end the poll now. I'll go ahead and share those results.
Okay, so the majority of you are less than 3 years. Okay, great. Again, glad that you're with us today. Our next speaker is Samantha Alexander, who's the National Compliance and Grants Manager from the Lion Foundation. Samantha, it's great that you're able to join us today. Welcome. Over to you.
Thank you. Kia ora, everybody, and thank you for taking the time. And I kind of feel that Pierre has done most of my work for me. So it's really important. I'm just going to quickly share my screen and give me 2 seconds. I think the most important thing that Pierre has highlighted is the aspect of research, because that is critical to most of the work that we all do, I think, across the entire philanthropic sector. It's the make sure you know what you're applying for. So, the Lion Foundation is what we call a Class 4 society. The colloquial language is pokies in pubs. We're not casino operators. We operate what we call electronic gaming machines in local venues. So essentially, the money comes from gambling. So please be aware of that when you do apply. I'm going to just jump into the next slide, which is just a very brief basis of the understanding of the Class 4 sector in New Zealand. There are quite a few societies that operate gaming machines, and because we operate gaming machines, we all distribute funding. There is a slight difference between applying funding, where you are, for example, Youth Town, and it all depends on your license that is issued to you from the DIA. On the license aspect, and this is where the research comes in, the license for a society to distribute funds can be different. It is not all, we don't all have to do the same thing. So you've got some societies that will only support certain religious activities. And on the other hand, you've got some societies that will only support sports activities. The Lion Foundation supports a large sector of communities. We support sports communities, education communities, religious communities, community arts and cultural communities. So we do support a wide range, and predominantly because we originated from the Lion Breweries days many years ago. We do a larger portion of the funds, about 40% of what we distribute plus minus, does go to sporting organizations. So the purpose of the screen in front of you is to actually tell you that a lot of the societies, it's important that you know where we operate from, because it isn't appropriate for us, for example, to take money which is raised from a venue in Auckland or Takapuna and distribute that money to an organization which operates exclusively, let's say, out of Warkworth, for example. We do not regard that as a close enough community connection. So on the DIA website, and it's quite a complicated website, but if you go to the email or the web address, you will eventually end up at a place where you can see quarterly dashboard. You download that and it will tell you New Zealand Community Trust has a venue in Remuera. And this becomes important when you understand your research and understand where money is distributed to by the various societies. We all operate things differently. We all have slightly different grant application processes, and I'll get to that in the next slide. So I've reached out to my fellow colleagues at Pub Charity, New Zealand Community Trust, as well as Aotearoa Gaming Trust, and we're all what we regard the national organisation. So we operate from the top to the bottom of both islands of New Zealand. Because we are all Class 4 societies operating gambling equipment and gambling machines, we are bound by the statute, by the Gambling Act, and we are also bound by the regulations. So there are regulations which tell us what we can distribute funding for and what we are not allowed to distribute funding for. Bearing in mind, though, that's the first step. And then the second step is our right or our entitlement to actually determine our own internal policies, which further add, unfortunately, to you a level of complication to your grant application. Again, research. So the Lion Foundation, Pub Charity and NZCT, we can only make grants for authorised purposes. So for example, if you are applying to us for fuel costs for your fleet of vehicles to deliver your services, we cannot fund those fuel costs. On the other hand, though, if you are an emergency service, Coast Guard, St John's, yes, we can fund those fuel costs. So it's these little subtleties that we need you to start to start understanding, because the amount of work that you put into your applications, it's quite disheartening for us when we decline you because it's not an authorized purpose, because we keep saying, please just make sure you understand what we can and can't fund. That being said, I call it the cesspit of what we can and can't fund, because there are so many little complicated ins and outs. The three national societies, we all like to return funds locally. Go to my example, I said in the beginning, if we've got a venue in Takapuna, we're going to distribute typically within a 5-kilometre radius of that venue. The notion being that we would like to return the gaming machine profits to the communities where the gaming machine profits were created. So where the money has gone into the machine, we like to return it to that community. We fund, unlike other people, we do not fund individuals. And in our case, we only fund properly incorporated not-for-profits or charitable organizations. We do not fund organizations that run their own gambling machines. And I cannot impress upon you enough, Pierre has pointed out the requirements for accountability reports. The only difference with us is if you don't get it right, we want all of that money back, because it is community funding, which can then be applied to someone else. So your accountability, your planning from start to finish is pretty critical, because if you spend money on something that we actually haven't authorized, we are going to ask you for the money back. And if you don't pay us back, you will probably never be funded by us again, unless we have some substantially compelling reason why we should. On the screen, I've given you the two relevant links to the Q&As for Pub Charity and NZCT. Again, the message from my colleagues at these two societies is please ask any readership or any listener to do their research. I'm now going to delve into a little bit of the TLF, the Lion Foundation. That's what we abbreviate ourselves to. We are a charitable trust. So in addition to funding authorized purpose in terms of the Gambling Act, we also must distribute funding for what we regard as a charitable purpose. So if you are a charitable organization and you are going to be hosting a commercial event, we're not going to fund you because your purpose of requesting the funding isn't a charitable purpose. I can go on for hours about this. It's not an easy concept, but it is, for me, it's an easy concept. You need to, again, do your research and understand what you're asking for funding for. We want to make sure that we're either promoting education, promoting religion, alleviating poverty, or benefiting a large community or a large sector of the community. I've said already, you must be incorporated. In other words, you must be a juristic or a legal personality, and you must, unfortunately, have a full income tax exemption status. We have got a document which we've sourced from our legal advisors, which explains exactly what we mean by a tax exemption. It is a whole exemption. It's not, well, we'll give you $1,000 discount on your tax bill. It's a whole exemption, i.e. you do not pay income tax. I do understand that can be quite a challenge to get from IRD at the moment, but you may want to speak to your auditor, because we will accept a letter from the auditor on their letterhead saying this organisation is wholly income tax exempt. We won't accept the letter which says they haven't had to pay income tax. That's not the same thing. So please make doubly sure that you are income tax exempt. And unfortunately, we have potentially funded in the past income tax, organisations who may not have been wholly income tax exempt. I do apologise, but we won't continue to fund you if we have made that mistake, but we're certainly not going to ask you for the money back. We will only approve one successful grant per year. So that means that you make an application, you physically get a grant approved, and the money is paid into your bank account. If you make an application this month and unfortunately we decline you, that is not a successful application. It means you can come back to us until we actually do give you, we do distribute a grant. to the point that Pierre made, he mentioned something about, applying, what amount can you apply for? There is no magic amount, but we will also say to you, look, we've worked through your application. You've applied to us for $25,000, but unfortunately, we've eliminated amounts which are not eligible. And actually, we can only find $2,325, which we could potentially fund. We'll pick up the phone and say to you, do you want us to carry on, or would you like to withdraw this, talk to us and try again? Because at the end of the day, if we know that you're only going to get, if our board is only going to approve a grant for 2,300 and you've wanted 25, we're going to say to you, look, it's up to you. We can put your application through as is, or you can withdraw it, talk to us, we can guide you, and you can come back to us for a grant which is going to have more eligibility around it. The audit from the previous grant must be completed. It's as simple as that. And our audit team, your grant letter, when you receive the grant approval email, will tell you that you've got to supply your audit within either 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And I'll just cover that off now. If, for example, as Pierre said, you are struggling with your accountability, don't remain quiet. Get in touch with us and say, oh, I'm battling. Can I have an extension, please? And we'll write back to you and say, sure, you can now submit on this date. And I'll come back to that aspect about when you have conversations with us and what I suggest you make sure you get. Again, I've just already said we're an inclusive funder. We do still accept paper applications, and that's because the Gambling Act says we kind of have to. Our preferred option is an online application, but I'm the first to admit that I hate doing anything online. So we do have that ability. You can go to our website, you can print off a PDF application. You must submit on the proper paperwork, and you can find those applications in your local venue. You can walk into the venue and pick up one from the gaming room or our website. Our online application process can be a little bit quirky, which is why we have published a step-by-step guide on our website. And if there's one thing I can ask you is please read that step-by-step guide, because the amount of time we spend trying to navigate your technical issues, it's really, really frustrating. I've reiterated the point there. We also have a venue finder on our website. So if you can't manage the DIA website, which is a challenge for the best of us, please go on to any of the society's website and you'll be able to drill down into where our venues are. It is unlikely, if we do not have a venue that you are close to, it is unlikely, however, not impossible to obtain funding. And if you don't have a venue in your area, pick up the phone. More than happy to talk through if we can help you and how best to achieve that. Again, as Pierre has said, provide all the information, because there is we sometimes receive 400 to 500 grants per month that we are working through. Not all grants have to have a wow factor. We don't need a sexy factor. We don't need, oh my goodness, this is going to make fantastic front page Herald. We don't need that. We just need you to keep it simple for yourselves, because it is a massive undertaking to do these grant applications. It takes a huge amount of work. Remembering, I always try and say to any grant recipient, start at the end, understand what you're going to have to submit from an accountability perspective, and work backwards to make sure that you've given us the quotes for that. Because again, as Pierre said, if we've given you money to buy cricket bats and you now go and buy soccer balls, unfortunately, that's not what we told you could spend the money on. So you're going to now sit with a deficit in your account because you bought soccer balls, you got money for cricket balls. So now you're going to be doubly down because now you have to give us the money back for the cricket bats, which you haven't bought. We don't accept internal budgets. We want 98% of the funding applications, we want competitive quotes. And that's because we're spending community money, and we have to make sure that you are not being, well, that your spend is going to be reasonable. So in other words, we're not going to actually authorize you to spend $2,000 on an air fryer when you could potentially get one from Briscoe's on a 50% or 60% store-wide sale for $150. So because we need to make sure that the pot of money that we have can benefit as many people as possible. I've got a little screenshot on there which says, this is how the quote should look. It must be addressed to you by an organization that we can actually verify with the quote, because believe you me, we check and we do catch people out. We need to verify. It needs to be correctly dated. Our website says it needs to be within 6 months of your application because of price fluctuations, etc. I don't want to open the discussion of salaries and wages. Suffice it to say that we have funded salaries and wages in the past, and will continue to fund salaries and wages that we have typically always funded for an organization. But if we have never funded a salary for your organization, we are unlikely to do so. And also, if we have funded salaries for your organization, please don't suddenly add the next salary because you've now employed a new person and we've never funded that salary. But please also consider Privacy Act implications, because we want to see the fully signed contract. Again, we need to understand the charitable nature. We're not going to fund a salary that you pay your CEO to $500,000 because our trust board does not feel that that is a good, a reasonable expenditure for a charitable, not-for-profit organization. Yep, I think we've covered this off. Again, one of the most important aspects here is we ask you, what do you intend? What is the specific purpose that the grant is going to be used for? You tell us it's going to be to buy 10 cricket bats. We approve the distribution of funding for 10 cricket bats. You then come to us and say, actually, we're no longer delivering the cricket program. Can we buy soccer balls? The chances of us agreeing to that are pretty much nil, because we do not have the ability post the grant approval process to change that authorized purpose. You may, however, write to us and say, you approved us buying 10 cricket bats from Rebel Sports because that was the cheapest quote. Rebel Sports no longer stock that cricket bat or cricket bats. We're going to have to buy it from Sterling Sports. Here's a quote from Sterling Sports. Yes, it's slightly higher than the previous one. Can we buy from Sterling Sports? And we'll go, sure, buy from Sterling Sports. But we won't do that only on the phone or by text. You must ask us for an email confirming that. And it's when I come to telling you how you get your grant approved, again, you can't rely on the fact that I've phoned you and said, oh, so excited, your grant has been approved. You need formal communication. Unauthorized spending of a grant will result in the request for a refund of the said monies and adhere to the audit timeframe. Key funding points again, we do not actually have any cutoff dates. We distribute funding monthly. Our regional grants committees, we have 4 of those. They meet on a monthly basis and they determine a deck of grant applications. Our trust board meets at the end of every month and approves those recommendations or not in some instances, and then you will then get a confirmatory email. The confirmatory email is going to tell you your grant has been approved. This is what it has been approved for. This is how much has been approved. And this is when you have to complete your accountability. So that is a very important letter. If for some reason you get money in the bank account, which you can see comes from the Lion Foundation, and you haven't received that email, please get in touch because there's been a glitch. That letter telling you what, when, why, and how is very important. Please don't rely on the money coming from us. You may, we have calculations. Just because we have a gambling venue in Takapuna doesn't mean that it is necessarily pumping out hundreds and thousands of dollars. We are entitled by law to take some operating expenses from the gaming machine profits, and we are required by law to distribute a minimum of 40%. But that 40% could vary. It could be a venue that generates $100,000 per month or $5,000 per month. So we have our own systems. And unfortunately, I think the message from most funders is going to be the pool of funding money is decreasing. It's getting ever smaller, and the applications or the request for that money is getting ever larger. We're splitting the pie into a lot of pieces, and we certainly cannot distribute more than we have available. My advice to you, if you're a first-time applicant, we have a checklist on our website. You are able to access our website. You're able to see the email, the telephone number, and the contact for your particular region. Please get in touch. Allowing 8 to 10 weeks for a decision. Pierre made that point as well. If you apply to us last minute, you run the risk of us not being able to process your application in time. You run the risk of your event being retrospective, because like Pierre, if your event has happened, we cannot fund it. So please, if you wanted, for example, to receive funding for an Easter function, it wouldn't help you to apply to us today, because you're probably too late. And also, give us time to actually process the application to work with you. So calculate about 8 to 10 weeks from start to finish. Our aim is to get the money to you quicker than that, but please give us that opportunity. If you are successful, you wait for formal confirmation. So please don't rely on a little text that some random person has sent you to say, oh, I heard that your grant has been approved. You get a formal email from the system, and then you get money in the bank. You are allowed to spend your money as soon as you get that that formal communication. That date of notification is crucial. Read the email, spend the money, but only on what you're supposed to spend it on. Complete the audit. And like council, like a lot of things, we certainly love to be thanked. We can't make that a condition of your funding, but we do like to be thanked, as do a lot of other Class 4 societies, because unfortunately we often get a very negative rap. So having something like this is really quite a pleasure. And finally, I'll answer any questions if there are any. We have our generic phone number. I've said to Simon, please happily share my mobile number and my email address. I'm paid to help you, as are my team of 3 grants advisors. We are paid to help us distribute money back to the community. Thank you very much. I hope I haven't exceeded the time. I'm going to try and I'm watching that quite, like,
Yeah.
right.
All good, Samantha. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Lots and lots of questions. We've got about 5 minutes and to get through them. So if you were a new charity, newly registered, how soon can we apply for funding?
Typically, we want to have 1 year's worth of financials available, because we want to know that we're embarking on a bit of I use the word loosely, but we're embarking on a little bit of a partnership with you, and that we are definitely, we're making a difference. The funding that has been generated is making a difference, as is your organization. So we do typically see a lot of organizations springing up. As I said, the pie is being divided into even more and more smaller pieces. So our trustees do like to at least understand that you've been around for a minimum period of 12 months. And the likelihood is that you're going to be around for a little bit longer.
Okay. So an organisation that's got a small fundraising team that's been many, many hours compiling applications for funding only to receive a rejection notice.
Yep.
Appreciate there's intense competition for funds, but they wonder if they're wasting their time applying. could you kindly address the dilemma that their charitable organisation and doubtless many others face in attempting
Yep.
to identify the magic bullet that
Yep.
persuades their assessors
Make-
to provide a positive response?
Yeah, so there is no magic bullet. That's what we all need to understand. And the second thing is pick up the phone and ask us, because sometimes I'm abruptly honest, but I appreciate, having been on the other side of the fence, the work that goes into this. So it could be a very simple thing that you've got wrong, or it could be, you know what, there is no point. And it's a very difficult conversation, which I've had to have with numerous people saying, look, unfortunately, there just isn't anything in there that we can fund, but I will work with you extensively. Pick up the phone.
Okay. So do you fund conservation or environmental groups?
Yes.
Great. You say you only fund applicants within 5K of a venue. As being rurally based, 5K doesn't really get us to the end of the road.
Absolutely.
Kind of venue.
Yep, absolutely. And that's why we say typically we fund within 5 kilometres, but we understand geography doesn't always comply. So again, give us 10 minutes of your time, meet with you online, on the phone, happy to have a cup of coffee and work out how you need to present your application. Because yes, sometimes and this is the thing, sometimes there are no other gambling machines in your area or venues that operate gambling. So we may be the only option, and you are now 8 kilometers away from us. So yeah, talk to us, because that's not that's not your, death by 5 kilometers. No.
So they operate on a Hauraki Golf Island, no gaming venues in 5K, but they provide the services across the wider Auckland. So I suggest they contact you for a conversation. Yep.
Yep.
Do you fund, where'd you go? Do you ever fund more than one activity for the same organisation the same year?
Oh, absolutely. So for example, let's take an organisation that operates courses along multiple courses. You can apply in your application, you can apply for everything and anything.
Right.
And we will tell you what you can and can't apply, just use the money for.
So next one, our office is based in Warkworth. However, we work with people throughout the country. Why can't we be considered for funding?
You can, but again, we need to understand where we would need to take the money from, and we would need to not convince or persuade, but inform the people making the decisions as to why it is appropriate that money that may come from Invercargill, for example, if you work around the country, why money from Queenstown, Invercargill, Dunedin can and should be applied to your efforts. So the onus rests upon you.
For a national organisation with local branches and only one central bank account, what is the best way to show that each local branch has approved their part of a group application?
We will contact the national body in that regard, and as long as the accountability is sorted, that's okay. If you've got one bank account and that's how your business operates, it's not for us to tell you. But yes, we will insist on an original document. Could be covered in the resolution. Again, give us a call. We'll tell you what to do.
Okay. Is your salary policy a new one? My understanding was that in the past, wages would be covered as a one-off consideration only and not an ongoing grant.
We have funded wages and salaries for organisations for year on year. Take Plunkett, for example. We funded their community workers for many, many years. So no, it is not a new approach. However, we are tightening up on the fact that we are not going to now suddenly open the doors to any salary or wage. If we talk contractors' wages, etc., again, everything is assessed on its merit. We need to understand the reasonableness of the salary, what the salary is for, and how necessary it is. So just because you now want to grow your staff, cut your cloth to suit if you can't rely on funding necessarily for that.
We are running out of time, and I've got lots of questions for you. I know you have to head away, so we will need to, sorry to the people that have left their questions, we are just simply running out of time. But
They're welcome to email me their question and I'm happy to respond to it, please.
brilliant. Thanks, Samantha. I sincerely appreciate that. And I certainly appreciate you being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Samantha.
Okay, we are doing a slight change in the program. So I welcome Josh from Foundation North. And he's the engagement advisor with Foundation North. Welcome, Josh. It's really great you can be with us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Josh Martin. I live in Tamaki Makaurau, and I work for Foundation North as Samantha shared. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Share that one. Cool. Okay, give me one sec. Cool. Is that on the right one? Yeah, cool. Sorry, I can't see where I am on these 15 screens I have in front of me, but as long as you can see the screen. As it says there, my name is Josh Martin. I'm the one of the engagement advisors here in Tamaki Makaurau. My rohi, the part of the rohi that I look after is really kind of West Auckland up through the north of Auckland. As far as Foundation North goes, our funding is specific to the Tamaki Makaurau area up through Taitokiro. So that's where we fund. We are the top funding funder of community grants in these areas. Last year we funded $55 million, as it says here on this slide. We funded $55 million into the community. We were set up back in 1988, as it says there. And what I would say about Foundation North, apart from the things that you see online, is that we care very deeply about the community, and we try our best to connect and engage in the development of relationships. So if you ever want to come for funding, a really cool thing to do is to reach out to our funding support team and to build organize a hui so that we can discuss your kaupapa and figure out whether or not we can support you in the future. When it comes to our values, these are our values, and the way that this looks in the real world or practically is this is not only how we operate as a team when we work with each other, it's also how we work inside the community. When it comes to your kaupapa, we look at whether or not they fit into this kind of framework as well. So just to quickly go through them, whakapana, it's all about enabling, uplifting, and reinforcing. So if your kaupapa is all around working in the community and helping to train young people, then we can support their ako, listening, learning, and understanding. The idea of working together, you sharing your information with others, bringing other people into the conversation, a kind of circular economy of knowledge is beautiful. Kia kotahi te hoi, paddling in unison towards the same goal. And finally, me mahi I roto te tika, te pono me te aroha, doing the right thing with respect and care. It's a really important part of our role is that we do no harm in the communities, that when we even look at the way that we get our funding, we invest into lots of different things around the world, and the money that comes back in, we really focus on investing into kaupapa that is also really supportive of the community, so we don't do anything that might be aligned with harmful practices, war, that kind of thing. So all of our investments even come back in a really healthy way. So we do the right thing with respect and care. This is the crux of how we fund. And when it comes to community funding, these are the 4 areas, our focus areas that we focus on. I will go into these more in depth a bit later on, but just quickly around social inclusion, there are specific focus areas or priority communities that we talk to whenever we speak about social inclusion. Increased equity is really around Māori and Pacifica, often specifically around Mātauranga Māori. Community support is kind of the more broad catchment that people fall into. And then finally, as you can see there, is regenerative environment, which can be around kai sovereignty, things to do with sustainability. Who can apply? very simple list there. Organizations that can demonstrate a charitable purpose. That's similar to what was said in the previous corridor, that we won't fund things that are for commercial reasons, but certainly for a charitable purpose. We do need you to provide us with annual accounts, which talk to the fact that we need you to have 12 months worth of history in your organization. There are ways around that, which comes to umbrellaing. So you can be umbrellaed by an organization that has already got history with us if you are new. And just to answer a question that was spoken to in Pierre's conversation, that if you have been umbrellaed by an organization and you've been successful in an application, the umbrella organization can also apply for funding through us. And they'll also, I mean, obviously, depending on the application, they can also be funded. Providing a service, project, or program of benefit to the communities of Auckland and Northland. Once again, we fund inside Taitokito and Tāmaki. Another thing that might be of interest is that when it comes to funding inside of that, if you are a national body, we would consider the amount of mahi that you do inside of these two areas, Auckland and Northland, we would consider that. So even if you are, like, for example, Rainbow Youth, you work inside of, like, all throughout New Zealand, but you do have mahi that falls inside of our areas, so we would consider you for funding. We do have a list of exclusions and limitations. I won't go through that. I'm sure that a number of you are already familiar with that, but if you do want to have a look, feel free to go to our website. We do have access to all of that information there. You'll also receive these slides at the end of the presentation. We have a number of ways that we fund. You can either come in for us for a quick response grant, or like I spoke to before around the community grants. Very quickly, our quick response grants is up to $25,000. So we often have people come in for $24,999 just so that they can get inside of the quick response grants. And that's awesome. If that suits you, go for it. The decision for this, and this is important to remember, is that it will be within 2 months of receiving a completed funding request. And I do say completed funding request, not just an application that you're forwarded. You might get it pushed back, and then you haven't included up-to-date accounts, etc. So once we've got the completed funding request, then you'll kind of 2 months start from then. Will it be 2 months to the dot? Probably not. It's quite likely it'll be a lot quicker, but there is a world in which it might take up to 2 months. As has been spoken about previously, with the number of funding avenues that have been cut through council in different kind of worlds, we are having a lot more applicants come through Foundation Northing, just asking for money. So if you can imagine the number of applicants that are coming through now, it's taking a lot longer to get through. And our amazing, super incredible assessors are working their hardest to get through everything as quick as possible. But that's just a really realistic time frame to keep in mind. All right, our community grants, and they're talking again to our focus areas around increased equity, social inclusion, regenerative environments, and community support. This is for anything that's more than $25,000. And with the number of applicants that we do have coming in at the moment, this is a really good thing to be aware of, that that will be a 5-month period before you're given a decision. And that's from, once again, a completed funding request. We have historically had 6 trustee board of trustee meeting through the year who make the decisions. In the next financial year, I believe we're increasing it to 7. So there's more opportunity for you to come in, but it's a really realistic time frame, is the 5 months from receiving a completed grant. And once again, that does say from more than $25,000. What I will say is that anything that is over $100,000 goes immediately to the board. They get to make the decision around that. Anything that is between $25,000 and $100,000 or $9,900, etc., that will sit with our leadership team who get to make the decision. So just a bit of information for you. What that looks like is that it could be quicker to get a decision across the line if it's less than $100,000. Okay, now I'm just going to quickly talk through our focus areas, which are what our funding is really based upon. So everything that we do answers to this. So whether it's a quick response grant or a community grant, it does need to fall inside of these 4 areas. Now, whānau, I would encourage you to take a little photo or just to wait for this. I think that this is the dream slide of any slide when it comes to Foundation North. This is exactly what we look to whenever we are looking at and being assessed, when we assess any kind of kaupapa that comes through. This is basically what we look at. So if you can answer these questions, if you can talk to these points, then it's highly likely, I'm not an assessor, that they will be like, cool, it's very clear that they are answering the increased equity theory of change. So what does that look like? Increased equity, as it says there, our kaupapa really is around, we will support approaches that achieve the aspirations of Māori and Pacific communities and address systemic and intergenerational inequalities in South Auckland and Northland. We also prioritise solutions that place children and young people at the centre. What this means is that when it comes to increased equity, and it's all around Māori and Pacifica, if you can talk, if there's kaupapa that is led by Māori or Pacifica for Māori and Pacifica, that's beautiful. If it talks to thriving tamariki, rangatahi and whānau, that's beautiful. Using mātauranga Māori or the understanding of Māori process and knowledge bases, then that's really what increased equity is about. That's not to say that every kaupapa that comes through that answers this will get funded. There's obviously other things that that kind of restrict. But in terms of increased equity, think mātauranga Māori, for Māori, by Māori, or by Pacifica, for Pacifica. And that just talks to that final kind of point there, Māori and Pacific languages and cultures thriving. Pakouru mai, social inclusion. This one is the kaupapa that talks to bringing or building community around communities that might not have, that might be live on the margins or might not have a lot of support otherwise. So what that looks like is if you fall inside of the refugee new migrants. New migrants is considered anyone who's been in New Zealand for fewer than 5 years, rainbow communities, people living with a disability, the priorities. But on top of that, even though it didn't say it there, it also includes South Auckland and all of Taitokiro. So if it's a program based in the Northland or in South Auckland, we would consider that as a part of the social inclusion theory of change. What this can look like is it can be organizational, it can be around delivering programs, it can be around inclusive laws and policy change, it can be providing access to programs, or once again, self-determination and influencing decision-making. So it's by that community, for that community, by disabled people, for disabled peoples, by Rainbow, for Rainbow. And then if we look at the change pathway, where it says things like tackling root causes of discrimination and racism, community aspirations and movement for change, what that means there is if the outcomes is greater sense of belongings, the way that you can deliver that might look like organizing an event or hui that's prioritizing community voice and lived experience. So whether it's a panel or, I don't know, there's lots of examples. So you can read the pathway as what the deliverable might look like, and what the outcome might look like will be a greater sense of belonging, acceptance, and inclusion. Regenerative environment. This is really around, once again, around mātauranga Māori. It's usually around ecosystems and community being renewed and regenerated. What I would like to say about this is we're really aware of the importance of kai sovereignty. We're really aware of the importance of circular economy. We had a hui up in the States last year and talking to the First Nations people of America, and just how in California, which is considered the fruit bowl of the world or the vegetable bowl of the world, that they've got 10 years left of healthy and fertilized soil. So if we consider what that looks like throughout the world, what does that impact? That's going to impact quite greatly on the rest of the world. So if we look to why this is so important, the regenerative environment here in Aotearoa, that's something that we're really considering and concerned about for our people here in Aotearoa. So if you have kaupapa, or if you've got mahi that's happening inside of this kind of world, if you can talk to the way that you engage with the communities using mātauranga Māori or practices of Māori, and the way that we might have connection and access to te taiao or the environment, then this is where you would fall inside of. And finally, if you don't fall inside of those other three, then everyone else comes into community support. And this is, we support participation and positive activities that improve community well-being. So there's a lot of different kinds of activities that fall inside of that. That might look like Coast Guard New Zealand. It might look like an organization who is, I don't know, planting trees, but they don't have connections with Māori. So there's a huge wide range of people that fall inside the Hapori Awhina, the community support section. So if you think, oh, I don't think I fall inside these other three, then perhaps you fall inside the community support. You can consider this the catch-all of those who don't fit into the other ones. Application tips, understanding funders' strategic goals. These are the 5 questions you really need: who, when, what, why, and how. If you can answer those questions, then that's going to be really helpful for your application. When it says this here, be realistic, what that really looks like is, I know that we have massive dreams that we can change the world, and it's only going to cost us $150,000. And you've never come into us before. What does the pathway towards that look like? What would it look like if you only got $5,000? What would it look like if you got offered $20,000? Is there a platform or a strategy to get to the $150,000? But along the way, you start down here. So just be realistic in your application. Finally, as it says there, our team is here to work with you and to support you. So if you do have any kind of questions, or you're uncertain on how to use Flux, which is the program that we use, that's our funding program, then please call our helpline. It's the 0800 number, which you'll get at the end. But we are really here to support you and to help you. Oh, did I miss something? You'll get this later on, but if you scan that, it will take you through to some useful hints as well. And finally, that's our contact details. Feel free to get in touch with me, or if you email info@Foundation North, then that will take you through to our funding support team. All right, I'm just going to stop share.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. I know you need to go. There's a couple of quick questions for you.
Go for it.
In the past, Foundation North have advised they have a priority areas and social services support with, and that support with sport and recreation is a lower priority. Is that still the case?
Is the sport and, sorry, the social
So
service
sport-
support with sport and rec a low priority? Well, look, it isn't a high priority area. So, I mean, again, if it fits inside of our community, our priority communities, rainbow, disability, new migrants, and it's a sport thing, then it would be a higher priority. But I can't answer that at the moment. I'm not one of the assessors, but what I would say is that it's just not as high a priority as the other things that I've spoken to.
Okay, so if you apply for a quick response grant, can you also apply for a community grant if they're for separate items?
I would say you can apply, but what that looks like though is that you will only be funded for one. We will only fund an organization once inside the 12 months from when you've qualified for an application, or when you get your funds.
Okay, so if you received a quick response grant within 12 months, you have to wait 12 months to apply for the Community Grants Fund?
Yes.
Okay. Would you fund a project that supports rangatahi who are Auckland based, but the event takes place in the Waikato?
I think that sounds like a conversation that should be held offline.
Okay. And I know you time is up, you need to
That's
go.
cool.
So thank
That's
you
okay.
so much. Really appreciate you being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. And please do feel free to reach out through the emails if you do need help. We've got a great team who are really willing to support. So thank you very much, everybody. Kia pai tō koutou rā.
Thanks, Josh. Take care. Okay. I'm doing a really poor job of emceeing because we are behind schedule. So my apologies for that. But lots of really good questions, and I want to include as many of them as possible. But anyway, our next speaker is Melanie Kennelly, Community Champion from Kennelly Retail Investments, which includes Z Good in the Hood. Melanie, appreciate you staying and being able to swap your time around with Josh because he needed to go. So thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's just got me out of doing some stock takes or given me a bit of a break from that this morning, so all good. Thank you for having me. Let me just come to my presentation. So, as you've said, this is a guide to Z Energy's Good in the Hood program. While it's run by Z have asked me to present this to you and explain how Good in the Hood works. So there are 16 retailers like my husband and myself who cover New Zealand, and we operate in specific regions. So Good in the Hood, is a program that is enabled by Z from the head office, but it's implemented on the ground by retailers like myself. So as I explain more about Good in the Hood, many of the local aspects of it will differ depending on the retailer in the particular region you're in, because we just all do things a little bit differently on the ground to each other. So how I run it across our 17 service stations may differ to how other retailers do, and I just don't know explicitly how they do it themselves. So I'll try and highlight that to you where it is applicable. So that's myself, Community Champion, and we look after the East Auckland, South Auckland and Franklin Z service stations. So how did Good in the Hood begin? It began with the first Christchurch earthquake on the 4th of September in 2010. And after that happened, the government, New Zealand government at the time, asked the large corporates in New Zealand to provide a significant contribution to a large pool of money that they wanted to use to help those on the ground in Christchurch. And Z Energy at the time decided that they didn't want to contribute to that pool of funds, that they wanted to give the money themselves to their retailers like ourselves, and then they had some of their own staff on the ground in Christchurch, and for them to decide how that money was best spent to help those in Christchurch at the time. And so that was done. There was no fanfare. It just happened. Decisions were made. However, after that, they got such great feedback about what had happened and how it had happened that they sat down in head office, and out of that came Good in the Hood. So it took a couple of years, and in 2013, Good in the Hood, as we now know it, began. So since 2013, when it started, they've donated over $10 million to community organisations and charities right across New Zealand. The important thing for Good in the Hood, it's I think much simpler, kind of smaller, but much simpler than those that I've been listening to presenting to you this morning. It's just all about supporting those who are doing good in their local community, doing good for people and doing good for the environment. And really, it's as simple as that. Local, helping others, or helping the environment. In essence, how does it work? So I'm sure most of you will have seen Good in the Hood when it's taking place in the service stations, the token voting, where there's four charities are selected from. So every year this is run, and groups get to apply for a pool of $5,000 per service station. So 4,000 of that is voted on by customers, and then 1,000 for each service station is what we call discretionary funding that is outside of that voting period that we get to use to help whoever might ask across the period of a year. It is always fascinating to see how the public vote, depending on the mix of charities at any particular station. And at the end of the voting period, that 4,000 is split proportionally based on how many votes a charity receives with their orange tokens. So how do you apply? It's open once a year, and last year applications opened in the month of July. At the moment, I haven't had confirmation of when it is exactly going to run this year, but I'll assume it's a very similar time frame. This shows a snippet of the Z website where it talks about Good in the Hood, and as you can see there, if you send an email to the community@z.co.nz, then they will add you to their list so that when applications do open, you will get an email from them. Anybody that I've already had as a group previously for Good in the Hood, they will tend to get an email from me when applications are open for in our particular area. So who can apply? As I mentioned earlier, Good in the Hood is about just supporting those groups and charities. And up until last year, it was explicitly charities. You had to be a registered charity. That did loosen last year, where you could be any sort of community organisation or charity who are helping people or the environment within your community. And we are really talking about that local community around a Z station. The one big difference to what I've heard this morning from others is that you don't have to have an explicit need for that money, or it's not tagged to a particular item like the cricket bats. If you get your money, it is at your discretion as to how you use it. There's no need to be giving it back if it's not spent in the way you thought it was going to be needed. So that is what a lot of groups love about Good in the Hood, is that really it's whatever you need to use it for, and as we appreciate, that need may change across the period of time from when you apply to when that happens. What we do love, though, is if we can find out what you've used your funds for, because that is great for us to know and to feed back to Z themselves. Applications are fully online, and there's a series of details to fill in, and that is back in that main Z website. If you're searching Good in the Hood, you'll come up with that, and it will only be available when they are open over that month's period. So they're really just looking for your name, what region you're operating in, who is your local Z service station you're applying to, the impact your charity has on the community, the difference you've made in the last 12 months, and the need your group is helping to meet. These were the main sort of question sections that they had last year if you applied. And again, I can't guarantee what they will have in there this year, but this is an example of what it was last year. You can apply to more than one Z service station. So if you are covering a much larger area, say for example in our region, if you are Middlemore Foundation, or you're a Totara Hospice, where you are covering literally the whole of my East and South Auckland area, your application doesn't need to be limited to the one Z service station, and you hope for that. We do select some charities or groups in more than one service station, but really there has to be a reason for that. And across mine, say, I wouldn't be putting the Waiuku Coast Guard into where the Pakuranga Coast Guard is. There has to be that regional relevance or connection. Once the applications close, we then get sent, myself and the other retailers get sent a spreadsheet with everybody who has applied, and we then do a lot of work reducing around 30 to 40 applications per site down to 4. And that's never easy. I certainly don't think it's easy, and it's not an enviable job. Personally, myself, if I don't know a group, if it's the first time they're applying, I will do a lot of my own research to see who they are and how local and relevant they are to the community around the station they're applying to. If you are successful in your application for Good in the Hood, your way of knowing that will be an email coming back from Z Energy themselves. And then after that is when, again, from the local perspective, as retailers, we will start getting in touch. But that email from Z is what you will need to be looking out for. So voting last year was around October, and for 4 weeks in store. Across that period of time, if you've been selected, then you are welcome to come in and spend time in that station, talking to those who are coming into store to buy fuel, because they are your local community, and they are the people that you want to let know what you are doing, and try and encourage them to put a few more tokens, which hopefully will get you a little bit more of your proportion of the $4,000. You honestly never know what will come out of spending time on site. So the ladies I'm standing with here in this photo were from Franklin Hospice. This was on the first day of voting last year, 2023. But Alison was telling me that when she was, this is Z Pukekohe, when she was in at Z Pukekohe, when she was part of Riding for the Disabled at the time, she talked to a customer who, after that conversation, ended up donating them a horse. So you never actually really know what is going to come from those conversations that you get to have, and that exposure. This is one of the things that, aside from the monetary value, is really an invaluable part of Good in the Hood, is this exposure to your community. At the end of voting, in our cluster, we will get all of our groups together for a check presentation, and in our case, I can have up to 68 different groups. By the time I do select multiple for some groups, it probably ends up being more about 55. So we get everybody together and we let them know how much they have actually got from Good in the Hood. And another one of the real highlights for those who come to this is that your ability to network at this gathering with 55 to 60 odd other groups that are doing like-minded work in the community, is that the stories that have come out of this and the connections that are made, it is amazing, and people absolutely love this. So at ours, we give away $68,000 by the time we cover our stations, and we like to have a little bit of fun doing some other things at our event as well. So it often ends up being a bit more than that. And so, as I've said, while the main part of Good in the Hood is that voting side of things, we do have the discretionary funding, which is just reaching out to your local retailer or popping into your local Z station, and they will generally then pass on your details. And it might be to supporting, in our area for Franklin, there's a lot of ag days and calf clubs happen, so there's little bits going to all of those. Food bank donations, helping create school gardens, hospice fundraisers, that just the list is endless. And my motto for that is I like to share the love, so it generally tends to be lots of little bits through the year for all sorts of groups as they ask, but it's a lot of fun. And really that is that's me. So I've got my email address here, and I know while I'm only applicable to that East Auckland, South Auckland, Franklin area, anybody's welcome to reach out. But if you're outside of that area and you've got questions, maybe it's best to try and contact Z themselves.
Brilliant. Thanks, Melanie. Some questions for you. They're asking who would be the contact for the North Auckland area. So suggest they just go through the Z Energy website and ask direct.
Yes, or if they've got a service station, a local service station, just pop in there and make contact through that, and I'm sure they'll put them in contact with their local retailer. That's how most do it for us, but yes, either way.
Okay. So how much do the owners and staff of each service station have in selecting the recipients? If our staff go into the service station to make themselves known, does this help us get chosen?
Really, again, that depends on the particular region, and for each retailer, I think we possibly we have our own ways of selecting. Some it might be the staff at each site, and some, in my case, I spend a lot more time on it for our region. So again, I can't answer for anybody other than myself to know exactly how that works, but it could be a mix of all of it.
Fair
across
enough.
the country.
So if people wanted to apply for the discretionary fund, how do they do that for the areas that you're involved with?
So again, if they don't know, in mine, most people seem to know me and manage to find me, but if you don't know who your, say, local retailer is, that's again just popping into your station. You end up with lovely little letters written from schools, or yes, emails from site leaders just asking me to reach out to different groups, or yes, there's whatever works easiest. You can go to Z again, and then they will redirect it back to the relevant retailer for the station.
So one comment that they found the Good in the Hood application process quite frustrating, as there is limited space and ability to really tell your organisation's purpose and impact in the community to do the sell. There's no other organisation in our community that engages in many tamariki, rangatahi and whānau as we do, but we weren't selected and felt it was our inability to provide the impact good story well. Well, are you aware if Z are looking at other ways to do this, being able to upload a video or a case study, for example?
I don't know, but I'm happy to feed that back. Sorry, I've got no control over the application process.
That's fine. So how do we apply for the closest Z station? We are city fringe, but can we apply for the Z station in the city central? So there's the drop-down box, isn't it? And people can choose what station they wish to apply to.
Yes, I think so. Again, I've never actually applied per se. I know last year they did regions and then finding the station within that, and a lot of people completely couldn't find South Auckland. And I had to get that changed at head office level. But I think it's you don't have to be limited to the one station, and just finding whoever is closest and most relevant to you.
So I've done a few, so I can certainly say to that person who asked the question, there's a drop down box, so just select your closest Z station, and if you are working in across the city or in pockets of the city, you can, as Melanie said, you can apply to more than one station. It just means you need to do separate applications. I think that's the end of the questions for you. Thank you so much for joining us today and for being so flexible and being willing to shift your time around. But I'm really sorry, it's now stock taking time. So I can't delay you doing that any longer. But thank you. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Stephanie, and everybody else.
Simon, we've now got 2 poll questions because I missed one earlier on because I was trying to make sure Josh left on time. So there's now 2 questions for attendees that are left.
All right, thanks so much, Stephanie. And here we go, folks. Just a couple of quick polls to end with. We'll do the third one here and now. How many funding applications does your organisation or group submit on a yearly basis? Less than 10 or a bit more than that? And we'll count down 3 and 2 and 1, and we'll end the poll there. We'll share the results.
Okay, so the majority are doing less than 10 a year, which is great. It's quite interesting. So it's a matter of whether they are it's funding what they need, or there's not that many that fund what they want, or maybe it is a resource issue and you're not able to apply to them all. Great.
And we've got one more, and we'll launch our 4th one here, folks. And this one is how important is income from trusts and grants for your organisational group? Is it your main source of income, just one of your sources, or is this a new activity for you? All right, looking interesting balance here. We'll count down from 3 and 2 and 1. And thanks for that, folks. We'll end the poll there. Share the results.
Thanks, everyone. So those that are just starting, certainly the ANCAD funding guide will be of use to you, and certainly the upcoming grant writing workshop that is being planned will also be of use. So that brings us to the end of today's funding forum. I'd like to ask Fiona Brennan from ANCAD to say a few words.
Thank you so much for your patience and attention and participation this morning. I hope you found it useful. It's been really interesting to see the different focuses of the presentations from our amazing funder representatives. So I think we've learned a lot from the compliance that's necessary, learning about the accountability and application process, learning about the values that underpin the organisations, the funding organisations, and the importance of communication with the funder, asking those questions, building the relationship so that they get to know you and your project. So really interesting to see and hear from such a broad spectrum of different funders this morning. So a huge thank you to our speakers. I know many of them have had to leave us already, but we do really appreciate the time and effort that they bring to this biannual funding forum. Just a reminder, just do take advantage of all of our courses, especially if you are in areas where you're eligible for free courses, and do reach out to your local boards and Auckland Council and other funders, because if we can offer our courses for free, we do. Otherwise, they're extremely competitive and low cost. And we have a range of very engaging presenters. Do contact us if we can be of assistance in other ways. We're very happy to help you with any requests or questions that you have. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you to Stephanie and Simon for organising this event. We really appreciate your efforts. Ka kite anō, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, Fiona. So I would just like also to thank all our speakers and to you for attending. I hope you found it worthwhile and that your grant income increases as a result. Just a reminder that the speakers' presentations will be sent to you. Don't forget to get a copy of your 2024 ANCAD funding guide and to check out the other training opportunities offered by ANCAD via the LIFT website that is brought to you with support from the Tinder Foundation, Foundation North, Four Winds Foundation, and local boards. There will also be a quick 2-minute survey that will appear at the end of this webinar. Please take a moment to complete, as your feedback is really important. And if you have suggestions for speakers for upcoming funding forums, please let Simon at ANCAD know. We're always looking for new speakers. Again, thanks to all of you. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.